the three most important issues facing Europe and the West are immigration, immigration, and immigration. They've got to cut the government back so much, it physically can't grow again. If someone who leaves another country to come and live in Australia permanently, they are admitting, Australia is a superior country. So let's cut the crap that you're going to bring your culture over to here. Read the Bible, get a bit of Jesus into your heart, and become a better person. And that might work.
He revealed his intention right there, and that is he wanted to teach the plebs what to say and what to think.
But I want these young men on both fucking sides, I want them to become fathers and inventors and artists and farmers and merchants and just have a happy life and leave something behind. And you bastards want him to go out there and get a bullet through his head, okay? And I'm thinking, and I'm the baddie? So Trump's turning into this legendary figure, and this is why, Fred, you do strike me as too pessimistic. I'm more relaxed about the perilous state of Australia. The Trump revolution's coming down under.
John Ruddick, mate, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Fred. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, I'm looking forward to this too, because you are among the people who we mix with who are aware of just how precarious Australia's position is at the moment. Just to start off with, how precarious is Australia's position right now?
Well, look, if we look at the macro picture, Australia still is in many ways the lucky country, okay? Because we've got a whole continent to ourselves. No other country in history, but not today, no one else can claim that, but no one in history's been able to claim that. And we've still got a relatively small population, okay, for a whole continent. And, when I was born in 1970, at that time, Asia was awash in blood. We'd had the Korean War recently. We were still in the Vietnam War. India and Pakistan used to have a few fights. China was having, the Cultural Revolution, which was a domestic thing, but pretty bad. Cambodia, Laos, the Malaya emergency. The communists killed 1 million people in Indonesia in the 1960s. We hardly know about it because there was hardly any TV footage of it, but no one doubts it. So Australia used to be freaked out by Asia, right? Well, what's happened now is, and all those wars were, communist related, one way or another, all communist. Okay, well then, thanks to the Reagan and Thatcher revolution, we showed the world that communism's all crap, and Asians said, oh, cool, well, let's go in the direction of democracy and free markets, and now, look, they're all booming. And so now Asia has transformed in my lifetime from this serious threat, and a lot of people in 1970 could remember when the Japanese actually did bomb us, Imperial Japan. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it wasn't it wasn't paranoia. And but now we look at Asia, that people are driving around in Mercedes-Benzes. There's booming stock markets. There's big shopping centres. Okay, now there's still a lot of poverty across Asia, but by and large, the things are going up. Okay, so that's good. So we've got all the natural resources, and we've got a reasonably harmonious society. Okay, so they're all the macro picture is still good for Australia, and that's why we keep fighting. Okay, we could turn this ship around. But then you look at things like, under Albanese, they're saying that something like 87% of the new jobs created were the public sector. This is bad. This is bad. And the Centre for Independent Studies had a report a few years ago, and they tried to quantify exactly what is the tax take that the government takes off the people each year in Australia. So they added up, of course, in federal taxes, income tax, company tax, GST. Then there's all the state taxes, a stamp duty on properties, and beer excise, cigarettes excise, gambling taxes, payroll taxes. Then you've got the local councils, okay, that they keep jacking things up. And the Centre for Independent Studies says, look, it's hard to quantify because it's so complicated, but they thought it was in the vicinity of 55%. Once you get over 50%, Fred, we live in a democratic socialist country.
So you're saying 55% of the population are net on the take from the government, and the other 45 are financing it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's similar, but what it's saying is, look, let's say the Australian economy has a GDP of $2 trillion per year. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't think it might be a little bit less, but it's in that vicinity. It's a nice round number, 2 trillion. The government's taking 55% of it off the people. So the people go out there, the hardworking people go out there and generate $2 trillion of new wealth every year, and various arms of the government reach in and say, cool, we'll have 55%, thanks very much.
Elon Musk pointed out to Joe Rogan the other day that, and he was quite emphatic about it, and I can't argue against it, that had Trump not won that last election, the American Republic was over, because the Democrats were hell-bent on flooding the country with illegal migrants who could vote legally, because in many states, like in California, it's actually against the law to provide identification when you go to vote. So the Democrats were well on the way to flooding the country to make it a permanently Democrat country. And had Trump not won, they probably would have achieved it. Now, at the moment, we've got a similar situation. You said the federal government has created all these jobs, mostly in the public service. Okay, they're guaranteed votes because they're going to vote for the government that created their jobs. Similarly, we've got both sides of politics sucking up to, for want of a better word, a better phrase, the recent cohort of migrants from the Middle East who, by and large, don't have Australian culture or Australia's prosperity at heart. So I'd argue that we are in a similar situation to the one that Elon Musk described. And if that process is not terminated, well, it could be goodbye Australia.
Well, look, I mean, I'll walk you through what the Libertarian Party policy is for immigration at the coming election.
Before you do that, though, do you agree with that summation?
Well, look, I think that illegal immigration and excessive immigration is potentially an existential threat to Europe and the United States because what's happening, because of geography, these people can just walk over borders or just, doesn't take far to get across the Mediterranean Sea, but you can walk in. Now, Australia has this magnificent thing around it called a moat. So, yes, we had some boat people, and it was bad, and Tony Abbott, that was probably his greatest achievement, thanks Jim Mullen. But by and large, I believe there should be a 5-year immigration pause, okay, which I'll get to in a second. But we have let in people who we've made mistakes with our immigration program, but by and large, we're letting in middle-class people from other countries. That's what is happening, okay, we've got more control over our borders thanks to the big moat that we have around us. Now, I personally believe that this country should have a 5-year immigration pause. We've been a very generous country, for we've let everybody in, which is terrific, but we need to have a little pause because we do need to get back to a policy of proud assimilation. So, yeah, come to Australia, you're voting with your feet. If someone leaves another country to come and live in Australia permanently, they are admitting, Australia is a superior country. So let's cut the crap that you're going to bring your culture over to here. Now, we'll just let culture will arise spontaneously. But I believe we should absolutely junk the word multiculturalism because multiculturalism is the state trying to impose culture on the people. Now, the best culture, of course, is something that arises spontaneously, organically from the people. And the state should be just completely neutral on our culture. Is why our party does not support the public funding of the gay and lesbian Mardi Gras, okay? And we don't even support public funding for Anzac Day. We say, well, all these things should, if people want to honour our war dead, fine. You don't think that there'll be people who say, yeah, well, I'll step up and I'll chip in $100. And some rich people say, I'll chip in $100,000. And people will fund the gay and lesbian Mardi Gras very comfortably. Very, very, corporate Australia can't throw enough money at our rainbow friends, okay?
Exactly.
So, as if they need government money, okay? But, So we believe in having a 5-year general pause on immigration. Yeah, whenever I mention it to people, they say, yeah, that's a good idea. And who can argue against 5-year immigration pause? It wasn't that long ago, if you even questioned our immigration levels, 100% everyone would say you're a racist, okay? But now what's happened, the left is not as pro-immigration as they used to be. Because when we've had 3 national votes with big culture wars, the Republic, gay marriage and the Voice, okay, the left was all about having as many sort of non-Europeans come into this country as possible. Well, then the non-Europeans on those 3 tests voted for the right-wing position. Right. So the left is not as hostile to a discussion about immigration as they used to be, which is a good thing. So I think we should have a 5-year pause. Now, there would be some exceptions around marriage visas from certain countries where we have a similar number of marriage visas each year, like with Canada or whatever. But look, the parties, look, and I spoke in Europe recently at Brussels, at the European Union. There was this meeting of right-wing MEPs and they kindly invited me to go. But anyway, I said to them, they asked me to speak for 5 minutes, and I said, the 3 most important issues facing Europe and the West are immigration, and immigration, okay? And I said, look, I'm a hardcore libertarian. I think Harvey Milei is the greatest president, in the world today. And I love President Trump, but Milei is better. This whole Doge thing, it began in Buenos Aires thanks to Harvey Milei. Milei and Trump love each other, you've seen them together. Yeah. But now the thing about, libertarians believe in low taxes and low regulation, okay? But let's say we have a period of high taxes and high regulation. Well, that's bad, but we can reverse it without too much difficulty. If a country happens to bring in too many people who are just not fitting in and they become like troublemakers, well, it's very hard to reverse. So this is why I say it's the most important policy. So this is why we have to be really, really careful with our immigration policy, and we have to err on the conservative side.
Why won't Liberal or Labor adopt the ideas that you're suggesting here?
Well, look, it is weird that as soon as we came out of COVID, without any public discussion, all the sort of OECD countries just immediately said, we've got a skills shortage, we need this influx of new migrants. And it's just like every country simultaneously just like lifted the floodgates, and there was just an enormous amount. And both sides of politics supported it. Yeah. Okay. Now, I think that was because this whole, how that you've heard this, that people say that we're actually been in a recession for about 1.5 years, a per capita recession, which is the important recession, okay, but they're smothering over it because, the population is increasing, so the economy actually did grow. Well, technically it grew, but there's a lot more people feeding off a pie. But the immigration sort of covers up the politicians to say, we're not in a recession. And no one's talking about being in a recession, even though we are in a recession.
So, are we in a precarious moment in Australian history? I mean, if we get another 3 years of Labor federally, what'll happen?
Well, I think there is a horror scenario which is, pretty reasonable chance to come off here, and that is a repeat of the Gillard government. A minority government, with cobbling together a coalition with Teals and Greens and, who knows who else. And then you've got to get through the Senate.
What's the outcome for the average punter then? Rabid inflation, more immigration from the Middle East. How's it going to pan out?
Look, the thing that they are most in love with, the thing that the left is like just totally, they have their little fads, remember it was just over a year ago, the left, they couldn't talk about anything but The Voice, okay? All the newspaper editorials and opinion pages, okay? All the comment, ABC, non-stop, social media, The Voice. And the left thought, it's the biggest issue in the world. It's the biggest issue in the world. Then when The Voice comes and goes, and then they just move on to the next thing. Yeah. But the one thing, the stayer for the left for the last 20 years has been global boiling. Yeah. If you go to a Liberal Party branch meeting across this country anywhere, 80% of them, Fred, will be global boiling deniers. 80% of them. Right. But you're right. They're MPs. Something happens when they get into Parliament. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, because I want you to be able to tell the viewers and the listeners how we get out of this. I don't think we're alone in thinking that Australia is facing close to an existential crisis. What do we do? I know you have practical and pragmatic solutions politically. Let's hear them.
Well, look, Tony Abbott and John Howard are both thought of as right-wing conservative prime ministers, okay? And they are both, every fair-minded person would say is, they are intelligent men. They're well-read. They've been interested in public affairs their entire life. They read lots of newspapers. They've moved at the highest levels. So they are smart. And because they are smart, they don't believe in climate change, and they never have. Okay. But John Howard was the Prime Minister when Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth came out, and the whole world fell for it. And rather than exercise leadership, and John Howard said, hey, everyone, look, I don't actually go along with this, and here's why. And he would have been howled down, but he could have made the case because he's smart enough to make the case. But no, John Howard went along with it. He said, oh, yeah, he's the one that brought in these first targets, you know. And then the same thing happened with, and then John Howard lost anyway. He did it to get votes. He lost anyway. He would have been better off. He probably would have lost if he'd come out and been a global boiling denier, but he would have lost with dignity. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, very sadly, it's the same story with Mr. Tony Abbott. Since when there was video of him saying that climate change is bullshit or something.
Yeah,
crap.
Yeah.
Then he denies that he said it. Okay. And then he went along with, and then to prove that he didn't say it, as Prime Minister, he did get rid of the carbon tax, thank you, but then he brought in all these worse things anyway. You should have Craig Kelly on at some point. He knows the nitty-gritty on those details. Now, since Tony Abbott lost, he's given, within only a year or two of him losing, he gave a speech in London and somewhere in Washington, in America, about global warming. And they were brilliant speeches. They were really, really intelligent, had depth, they had unique insights. This is where he said, we used to throw goats into the volcanoes. It was provocative, okay? But it was a brilliant article, a brilliant speech. But that's what he really believes. But unfortunately, as Prime Minister, he said, oh, no, global warming is important. And now Peter Dutton is in the same category as Howard and as Abbott. Peter Dutton may not be at the same intellectual level as Abbott and Howard, but he's a right-wing conservative, and he knows it's all bullshit. And but he's going to go along with it. Trump gets out of Paris. The media asked Peter Dutton the next day, are you going to get out of Paris? No, not getting out of Paris. Okay? Now, this is...
So he knows in his heart that Paris is rubbish.
Yeah.
The same applies to Ukraine. I mean, these politicians, both major parties, have backed themselves into corners and feel... What is it about politicians where they can't admit that they're wrong?
Oh, look, this whole Ukraine thing is just so distressing. When we're dealing with, Russia and 6,000 nuclear weapons, and just things are sort of becoming very, very unstable, which is exactly what we feared, which is exactly why we shouldn't be having, throwing bombs at Russia on Russia's doorstep, because you don't know how things could unfold. Things can happen quite quickly in these tense situations. But the Western left, for most of your life, Fred, and most of my life, have been out in the street protesting against every goddamn war there was. They hated war. They hated the Vietnam War. They hated the first Kuwait War. They hated all George W. Bush's wars. They were right about that. They hated everything until Obama becomes the president. Then they love Obama. And then Obama decides to go and blow up Libya and Syria and escalate things with Russia. Then the Western left disappeared. Then Trump comes out and becomes critical of the neocons. So then the neocons tried to kill him in the Republican primary in 2015, 2016, but Trump beat them. And so then the neocons, who were very intellectual type of people, they said, oh, okay, well, we'll just go and join the Democrats. And so the Democrats have been the anti-war party. They say, oh, well, look, you guys hate Trump and we hate Trump, so let's jump into bed together. So then the Democrats are just so mindless about Trump that they just thought, the neocons came in and said they just basically took over the Democrat foreign policy. And the Democrats just went along with it because all they could think about is how much they hated Orange Man. So now the Democrats have become the pro-war party again. Okay?
Well, a couple of hours ago, Donald Trump has pretty much you probably saw it, he announced on Truth Social that if Hamas doesn't release the bodies or the hostages, he's going to wipe them out. And he's given Israel the authority and the wherewithal to finish off the job. It was a very, very aggressive and undiplomatic post. That leaves our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, who loves Hamas, in a pretty awkward situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, look, the only good thing that's come out of that part of the world recently is Egypt yesterday announced that they've put together about $56 billion from various Arab countries. I mean, the West has been critical of the Arab countries, saying, well, why don't you help the Palestinians? Well, thanks to Trump's pressure about his fairy tale about, we'll make Gaza Trump Disneyland. But that pressure has made Egypt, which has historically been the political leader of the Arab world, the Saudis are more the leader of the religious world, but they've stepped up and they've gone and got $50 billion to rebuild Gaza. So let's just hope like hell that the Arabs said that $50 billion is contingent on the removal of Hamas. So even the Arabs said that.
Wow.
So I thought, look, this thing's winding down.
Yeah.
And that's good. Okay.
Yeah. But what we're seeing here, John, is these are pragmatic and dynamic solutions to what used to be seen as complex problems that could only be solved by career diplomats and career politicians. And Trump comes along, property developer, and finds ways of solving problems by doing deals. Why isn't anyone, other than your good self, in Australia following that kind of that formula?
Well, my favourite foreign policy venture of Trump, which was so unorthodox, was when he just rang up Rocket Man. He said, "Oh, do you want to have a cup of tea in Singapore?" Now, since the Korean War, and particularly since they got the nukes in the 1990s, everyone in the Western world, the foreign policy establishment, has agreed the solution to North Korea is just to strangle it with sanctions, cut it off, and eventually the people rise up and overthrow these dictators and it'll become a happy liberal democracy. Well, it hasn't worked. And then they keep building these nukes, And, Seoul is one of the great cities of the world, It's as impressive as Tokyo. It's about 20 million people, happy people. Half of them go to a Protestant church, okay? South Korea sends more Christian missionaries out into the world than any other country other than the United States. So South Korea is a magnificent country. We don't want it nuked. But anyway, so this is the strategy that everyone agreed with. Strangle them with sanctions, don't talk to them, never visit them. Okay, and then Trump says, let's go and have a meeting with this guy. Now, and they got along well. Now, unfortunately, they didn't sort of come to an agreement. That Trump said, look, we'll invest a lot in you if you liberalise a bit. They said, we'll think about it, and they didn't. And then they met a couple of other times, I think. Now, what Trump did by defying the orthodoxy is it defanged it just tamed them, just made them, because we could actually see how much this guy sort of has stars in his eyes when he meets Trump. He said, "Oh my God, I'm meeting Donald Trump. I can't believe it." So, and we just saw that he's not sort of like Joseph Stalin, this sort of madman with his fingers on the nukes. He's basically just a little fat Asian kid, okay, who happened to a thug, of course. But so that was a good thing. Then the Abraham Accords was great. Yeah. But you're right, in Australia, there's just basically no distinction in our foreign policy between the major parties.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Libertarian Party, just so the viewers are clear, when it comes to economics, we're basically the same as the Liberal Party, except we really, really mean it. So we don't just talk about cutting debt and cutting spending and cutting taxes. We'll be fanatical about it because that's our primary purpose. But the other area where we really disagree with the Liberal Party is that we believe we should have Switzerland-style foreign policy.
Well, before you move on to that, I just want to quote you to you, and that is from your maiden speech. I've said this before, but I think it's one of the finest sentences uttered in any Australian parliament since Federation. That is, libertarians are, Libertarians are coming to power all across the world so we can leave you all alone.
Yeah, plotting to take over the world.
Plotting to take over the world so we can leave you all alone.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
The most attractive plank in your platform for me and for most Australians would be that you are obsessed with reducing the size of government.
Yes.
Hallelujah. I mean, I don't think the Liberals really are. How do we get more politicians to talk like that?
The reason why Australia is still quite a wealthy country, and we've got even though we've had bad leadership for about 20 years, but we had the Liberal Party for most of its history was very good. Now, one example of that is when John Howard lost in 2007, he handed over to Kevin Rudd a Commonwealth debt of about $20 billion, which with a country like Australia is nothing. It's like owning a $100 million house in Vaucluse and you've got like a $80,000 line of credit against it. So thank you, John Howard. I'm critical of John Howard for various things, but on the debt position, he basically stayed within his means. Rudd comes along, the GFC comes along, and bad government under Rudd and Gillard, and then they hand over to Abbott and Hockey $256 billion. And Abbott and Hockey had been thumping the desk for a couple of years saying, oh, look at this debt, it's going through the roof, it's going through the roof, it's a national crisis. Vote Liberal and we'll get on top of the debt. And I remember people being freaked out saying, oh my God, that Labor's got us into so much debt. I said, look, 256 billion isn't good. It'd be better if it was zero. But believe me, it's still not, we'll just have to pay it off, but it won't be that difficult. We can pay it off over 10 years. But it'll be good the Liberals come back in because they won't make it worse. Well, then what happened was Abbott wins in 2013. By the time we get to just before COVID, so we've had 3 Liberal Prime Ministers, Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, for no reason, because we haven't even got to COVID, the debt's up to 263 billion. Now, we didn't have a war, we didn't have a recession, we didn't have a friggin' pandemic, fake pandemic, but they just couldn't stop spending money. Then COVID comes along and it goes to about $1 trillion. Gee, thanks, Liberal Party. So what we need to do is, now what with this government cutting back the government spending, this Doge thing is just a libertarian's, utopia, okay? And having the magnificent Elon Musk and the smartest team of people in America cleaning it all up. Now, the US government, federal government, spends roughly $6 trillion a year, okay? That's what they... And they've got a $36 trillion debt. So their debt position is a lot worse than Australia's. Australia's is bad but not terrible. America's is terrible and worse. And here's Musk out there, and Trump. Did you see that post from Trump about a week ago? He said, Elon, I love what you're doing with your Doge, but just one complaint, you're not going hard enough. Please, please step it up.
Yeah.
That was funny. Yeah. So now, we all knew that there was waste and inefficiency and duplication in government. And that's what we thought they were going to find in the Doge. But no, there's been endless cases of outright theft.
Yeah.
So we got all the other stuff, which we expected, but I didn't expect how many of these people who are sort of connected to the Democrat Party in some way, they get out of politics, they go and set up, the Climate Research Foundation Centre of Integrity in New York, okay?
Yeah.
They give it some big flash title,
yeah.
and then before they know it, here's $1 billion for your institute.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's just this, that,
and then they call it a not-for-profit, which to the general public makes it seem virtuous.
Yeah.
I heard the phrase, they're always referred to as non-government organisations, and someone referred to them recently as government-organised non-government organisations. So they're called gongos, really.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that's
gongos.
A good phrase.
That is a good one.
But, we see all this coming out in the United States. To people who watch even passively, it's not entirely surprising that the corruption is this deep. Where is the exposure in Australia? Surely, if it's happening over there, it's happening to at least a similar extent here. It's got to be.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
So who's going to root it out?
My hunch is, firstly, we don't know, but I would say it's probably on a per capita basis, 70% as bad.
Yeah.
I think they really perfected it in America. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's worse. It's worse.
Yeah.
Now, Peter Dutton's come out and said that he's going to appoint Jacinta Price to be the Australian Elon Musk. Now, we all love and revere Jacinta, and she's very, very talented. Okay. However, look, I don't think she has an economics background. And what we actually need is not to appoint a politician to run the Doge. We need to do exactly what Trump's done. Find some mega brain, successful genius. We need someone who understands a profit and loss statement, where the money goes.
Someone like Matt Barry.
Matt Barry, perfect, love it. Yeah, and he's also got the personality and the drive to sort of lead it, not just do the examination, but to bring the public along with him.
Yeah.
Magnificent.
Yeah.
In fact, we should pass a motion at the next North Shore branch of the Liberal Party calling on Matt Barry to make himself available for the Doge. I love it.
Yeah.
I hope you're watching, Matt.
You're next, Matt, on the Fred Paul podcast. Yeah.
Now I think, here's exactly what we want. Actually, I was going to sort of spend 5 minutes describing the person you want, but you've hit the nail on the head, Fred.
Yeah.
Now I would say that we need. Well, look. Ron DeSantis has now, the Doge has become contagious. It started in Argentina, went to Washington. DeSantis has just announced he's going to do a Florida Doge. Right. Okay, and I think there's going to be just so much waste everywhere. And I would say in Australia and in the federal government and in the state governments and even in the local governments, I bet there is, I'm pretty sure we could cut the spending by a third overnight and basically all the, let's say, quote unquote, essential government services would continue to be completely fine.
No one would notice.
That's right. That's
Mark
right.
Stein used to point out that a couple of generations ago, the only government employee you came into regular contact with was the postman.
Right. Yes.
Nowadays, you can't do anything without encountering not just a government employee, but a government employee who is determined to obstruct whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So, yeah, I think the country's in a pretty parlous
Well,
state.
Fred, I want to put this to you. I mean, you and I are about the same age. You were, and we've got very similar politics, but you would have grown up revering Reagan and Thatcher.
Yes.
Okay, as I did. They were sort of like gods for me for most of my life. But this is the libertarian critic of those two great leaders, okay, that they had very good rhetoric and they were and huge charisma, and they were people of great integrity, and they rallied us and we won the Cold War behind them. That was a pretty big deal, okay. But in terms of the economics, they were classical liberals who just believed in small government, low regulations and low taxes, okay. The libertarians said, well, they're not, we would go to an extra level of cutting back the government. And this is why the libertarians have proven to be right and the classical liberals have been proven to be wrong. Because under the leadership of Thatcher and then Reagan, the whole world basically embraced these free market reforms, okay? And the governments did get smaller, okay? And the people boomed, And then this is why the third world that embraced free market capital, this is why China and India have been booming, because they're basically following what Margaret Thatcher did, but that's good. But what happened in the West was, we did cut the government back, but then a generation later, when we get to GFC and COVID and global warming, the state is now bigger and more bossier, as you just said, with the postman analogy. The government is more intrusive in our life than it was before Thatcher. So we're saying, okay, well, therefore their little revolution was a short-term win, but then just a generation later, we're back to a bigger government than ever. So the libertarians say they didn't go far enough. They've got to go like Harvey Milei. They've got to cut the government back so much it physically can't grow again.
That's frightening for a lot of people. And the term that it comes under is anarcho-capitalism. Is that correct?
Oh, no. Well, I was actually describing to you the step above anarcho-capitalism, which is minarchism,
right,
which is what people like Ayn Rand and probably Milton Friedman, and they would say, no, we do need a government. Yeah. And they would say, we need it for three things. We need it for police, for courts, and for defence, and nothing else.
Right.
And they also say that people would voluntarily donate to that very small government because I think, well, you don't want to be in.
Where do the libertarians stand?
Well, then below that is the anarcho-capitalists, which is sort of like the really purist libertarians who say, you know what, the problem is having a heavily armed gang out there, which is called the state. Now, there's only 200 of these entities on the whole of Earth because these states all have their origin in an armed gang establishing a geographic taxation monopoly over some land. And then they always want to grow. And they get their way because they've got all the guns, or most of the guns, and they extort about a third of the income off all the people every week. They say, go out and work, people, give us a third of taxation. And then if you don't pay it, society will crumble without us. We're the ones that keep the harmony. Without us, there'd be anarchy. Or there'd be chaos. And so people just go along with it. But then the state always wants to expand because who gets attracted to running the state, to having control of the guns? Weirdo, egomaniac politicians. And so they want to expand the state. And that's why we've had so many wars. And then the reason we've only got 200 countries is these states keep expanding until they bump up against another one, which was another expanding state, and they often have wars. Everything the government does, Fred, okay, can be done by the private sector. Let's talk about the needy. Let's talk about the people who are sort of homeless or borderline homeless, okay. And the state has made us all believe, if you care for homeless people, you've got to pay taxes because the government will go and look after them, okay. Well, the government gives them money, but after they give them the money, they say, we'll see you in 2 weeks when I give you more money. They have zero interest in their rehabilitation. Now, if we had no government, do you think that means a lot of people would have a lot more money in their pocket? Now, people are generally compassionate people. Some people are very selfish and they won't care less about homeless people. There'll be a significant number of people would say, oh, wow, there's homeless people there. I feel compassion for them. So they would pool money. They would say, okay, look, I'll put in $1 million. Who else is up for $1 million? And they make a little promotional video, say, look, give us money. There's all these homeless people here, and this is our plan to get them back on their feet to make them productive again. And other rich people would watch this video and say, well, that sounds like a cool plan. I'll give you $100,000. So let's say they end up with $50 million. And they got this amazing plan to get homeless people rehabilitated and off the alcohol, off the whatever they're on. And there would be competing private charities who'd say, no, don't give money to that private charity. We've got a better plan. Look at my promotional video. And they would compete to say, and then they would go out to these homeless people. Now, some of them would be Christian churches. And they would say to these homeless people, hey, look, read the Bible, get a bit of Jesus into your heart, and become a better person. And that might work.
So the modern secular state assumes the role of conscience.
Yeah, well, they're basically saying that only the government has compassion for the needy. They've got a monopoly on the morality of feeling compassion. I think that particularly in Christian countries, I think that we do have compassion. We just naturally do.
Well, humans do. Humans have compassion and humans have a conscience. I think the sort of most hardcore bureaucrats would absolutely deny that. But we are now at a point in history where we are rediscovering not only the fact that humans naturally have a conscience and act according to it, either against or in compliance with it. I mean, people act against their conscience all the time, but that is a conscious decision. I don't think I think every time the government assumes that role, it ends badly. But just to play devil's advocate for what you were advocating then.
Sure.
So you have competing organisations, charitable organisations.
Yeah.
We've seen over the past couple of hundred years in the sort of age under the umbrella of the American style of social structure that that an organisation could be motivated to deceive people and say, we're the most charitable, and be siphoning off 90% of the money that goes their way. How do you...
Well, there would be if there's a private sector competition where there's, say 20 charities, they're all going to be striving to prove their transparency, their financial transparency. And so they're going to be bending over back. They're not going to have government rules that they have to comply with, and they say, we'll just do the minimum requirement. No, they're going to be saying, look, invest with us, and you can come if you're a donor to us, you can come out and see our work whenever you want. You can turn up whenever you want, and you can have a look at our bank account. Now, some of these private charities might find out, Fred, that they can be more effective if the charity actually is a for-profit business. A lot of them will not be, but they might say, look, if we get a CEO that we pay $500,000 a year to, we actually find out that we have a 15% better improvement in people getting off the street and becoming a productive person again. So
have we reached a point where our societies are too big to make those changes, to sort of have a common moral code that, I mean, a country as big as the US, for example, is difficult to change. It's difficult to impose moral standards on a country that big and free.
Well, look, the anarcho-capitalists believe that big countries should become small countries. We believe that the United States would be a lot happier if it was 50 independent countries. Now, they can have a mutual defence pact, so they can keep all their military in place if they want, and they just agree to join. If you don't want to be part of that military defence pact, you don't have to be. But I think they probably will say, may as well. And they can have free trade and some stuff, but they can set their own immigration policy. But I mean, seriously, what the hell has rural Alabama got to do with the middle of Manhattan? Okay, why can't they and let's let Manhattan be its best Manhattan?
Well, you could say the same about Australia then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the most important country that should be split up into about 100 countries, Russia. It's too big. Too big and powerful, right? Yeah. And this is why it's always getting into trouble, okay? Now, I'm somewhat sympathetic to the John Mearsheimer case that, that NATO has provoked all this thing, but let's put that aside. Russia is sort of like a garrison state, because to dominate so much geography, you're going to be a very tough state. So we'd be all better off if we were little countries, like Switzerland, okay? Or
Getting back to Switzerland,
Yes.
right? Let's hear your version of why Switzerland is the model.
Okay, well, look, about 500 years ago, European history is just one bloodbath after another. Okay, now to be fair, there have been periods of extended peace as well. Between Napoleon and the First World War, there was barely no war in Europe. Okay, and but there has been a lot of wars in Europe. And right in the middle of Europe is good old Switzerland. And 500 years ago, some king or somebody, or maybe a council of elders or something, said, hey, why don't we have this policy where we're not going to do war? And everyone said, yeah, that's a cool idea. So they just told everyone, hey, we're not going to do war. And everyone's like, oh, that's okay, cool. Well, we can be friends. We're never going to go and shoot each other. No, we're going to be mates. And we can even do some trading and everything. Oh, well, we can trust you because we know we're not going to go to war. And no one's invaded them. Now, to be fair, Napoleon actually did sort of, for about 2 weeks, march his army through there. So he was invaded, but I don't think many people died. I don't think maybe no one died. That's the only thing. Now, we've had, in very recent memory, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, lots of death and destruction, lots of tension and everything, swirling around the whole of Europe, Switzerland sits down in the middle. Yeah, hi, everyone. We're mates with it all up. Yep. Adolf Hitler, you're not going to invade me. No, you're Switzerland. No one invades you. Joseph Stalin, you're not going to invade us in Switzerland. No, you're Switzerland. We're not going to invade you. Of course not. That's how they feel. Gee, and I'm thinking, why doesn't the whole world do that? Okay. Now, it's not like Switzerland doesn't care. They have only set up the world's most successful charity in human history called the Red Cross, which is not the government, which is private Christian citizens. And now they've got the Red Crescent, which does other good work. So, thanks, Switzerland. And when there's an earthquake somewhere or, when they need humanitarian aid, the Swiss can get in there because everyone trusts them. If there's a earthquake in Iran, the Iranians may not want American and British and Australian earthquake rescuers to go in there. But if the Swiss say, hey, if the Swiss ring up Tehran and say, hey, you got that earthquake, we've got a really good team of 100 people that can help. They say, come in, you're Swiss. Why can't the world be Switzerland?
Can we?
Well, that's what we're fighting for at the Libertarian Party, okay? Right. But it's not just this foreign policy, which is itself brilliant, okay? Most people have got a gun, okay? Yeah. And now it's a bit more regulated than the United States, but that basically says, well, the government can't get out of control because, the people can overthrow the government if they do get out of control. And that's why then the government stays very low, and in some of it, and they've got less population than New South Wales, just a little. There's about 8.5 million in Switzerland. But then they're divided up into about 15 little cantons. So and then they have these plebiscites every year. We're thinking about raising the tax, or we're thinking about building a new bridge. Let's everyone have a vote on it. In the springtime, I think they go on. Most people go and vote on about 10 different things. Okay, and then they have very low taxes, okay, and then
how do they have a pretty impressive education system, don't they?
Well, the education system is it's dominated by private schools, but there are government run schools, but it's the healthcare system, which is again what we should all be doing, which is the government's not in the healthcare industry. It's all run by the private sector, with 2 exceptions. Firstly, if you are a low-income earner, at the beginning of every year, the government will send you a voucher and say, here you go, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Schultz, whatever your name is. This is a voucher that lets you go and buy private health insurance. So she's still got to shop around the market. And they've got about 195 private health insurers. Now, the other thing the government does is if you're over a certain income and you can't prove that you've personally gone and paid for private health insurance, then they fine you. Okay, but it's not the end of the world. But basically, 99% of people have got private health insurance. And they've got the best health stats in the world. They've got the longest longevity in Europe. They didn't go crazy on COVID. They had the lowest vaccination rate in Western Europe, about 59%. Britain and everyone's like 90% type of thing. So Switzerland is, the whole world can be like Switzerland, and they invent lots of stuff,
Well, the biggest issue at the moment, or last week anyway, in the as yet unannounced federal election, was which side is going to spend more money on Medicare. I think every time a politician mentions Medicare and how much they care about it, we take another step towards the NHS.
Oh yeah. We should be following the Swiss model, and in every election, state and federal, Liberal and Labor, they say, vote for us, we'll spend more on health.
Yeah.
And it's and I actually think, it's not often I need to go into hospital for whatever reason, like usually to see a family member or a friend or something, but I'm actually always, because you always hear in the media, oh, it's so bad, it's so bad. Whenever I've had to go to a hospital, I've thought, gee, this is pretty professional. This is all seems to be working pretty well. Everyone doesn't seem to be stressed out. Now, the media, they keep wanting to create the sense of crisis, because it's the opposition. If some crisis happens in a hospital, some tragic thing happens, the opposition then goes and make a big song and dance about it. The government says, oh, we won't let it happen. The media criticise everybody. So it just escalates this. Just means more funding, when it should be all run by the private sector and private health insurance, and we'd all be happier.
Let's talk about hate speech and free speech. Why has Australia found itself, robust, larrikin, fun-loving, plain-talking country as it is, how has it wound up with some of the worst and most comprehensive, even confusing hate speech laws in the world?
Paul Keating, in my opinion, was a good treasurer, but then he was Prime Minister, and he was a terrible Prime Minister, okay? Mabo, the flag, the Republic, we hate Britain, America, we love Asia. And another bad one was he introduced 18C.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Racial Discrimination Act.
Yeah.
And he said, look, it's going to be, a problem if you are rude to people because of their race, or you threaten violence against people because of their race. And at the time, but this is just part of Keating's left cultural agenda, okay? And
well, I can elaborate on that, because the Attorney General at the time was Michael Lavarch, if you remember rightly, and I looked into this when I wrote the book on Bill Leak, because it wound up having enormous consequences for dear old Bill, and in my opinion, contributed to his death. But all that aside, Michael Lavarch, when he was introducing this legislation to Parliament, he said this legislation is educative. He revealed his intention right there, and that is he wanted to teach the plebs what to say and what to think. It was one of the... It flew under the radar because it's just one word in the millions of words in Hansard, but I think that was a bit of a turning point.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and at the time, the Liberals were so frightened of being accused of being a racist that they sort of didn't make a big song and dance about it.
That's right. They were actually divided over it.
That's
because
right. I think,
and it's easy to whip up paranoia about these things, because as Sam Dastyari said once, I mean, he's not alone, everyone says it, what is it that you want to say to me? What racist thing do you want to say to me that you want to be legalised? I mean, it's easy to vilify the person who is advocating for free speech, but what the effect is that you're creating a subjective response to someone's possibly legitimate opinion and making it illegal.
Yeah, there's always been taboos in society about sort of things that you can and cannot say, but they were taboos, and they would change with time. But what we've now entered the realm of, and taboos aren't a bad thing, okay? But now we've entered the realm where the state is enforcing taboos through the threat of violence, through laws, okay? So it started in this country in 1993, and that was, but then it accelerated. It really, they really hit top gear, I believe, during COVID, when they're treating us like sheep, farm animals. And 90% of people went along with it. And I think that these, the people who want to bring in these censorship laws and big state control, they thought, oh, wow, we can treat them like farm animals, and 90% go along with it. That must have been almost like an experiment. They thought, if there'd been this big revolt, if there was 1 million people out in the street, okay, they would have thought, well, it can't go too far. But when they thought, wow, these people are so docile, except for those evil bastards like Fred Paul and John Ruddick, just those clouds, those fringe nobodies.
Yeah.
So we can get away with anything. Then they thought, bang, let's go hard on the free speech. And it was all around the Western world, and in particular in the Anglosphere. And even Joe Biden brought it in when they had control of Congress. Just like our misinformation bill, went straight to the Supreme Court, and of course they just said, illegal, unconstitutional, throw it out. Now, but the fact that Biden wanted to do it, and Justin Trudeau and Keir Starmer, and it comes in under Tories, it comes in under stupid Liberals, under Scott Morrison, and Peter Dutton didn't say anything about the time. And once again, Tony Abbott had good instincts on this. He must have said 200 times, oh yeah, vote for me, we'll get rid of 18C. George Brandis, no right-wing Liberal, no arch-conservative. George Brandis, big lefty, big mate of Chris Pine and Malcolm Turnbull, but a very smart jurist. He gets up there and then suddenly says, look, I'm sorry, but you know what? You've got a right to be a bigot. Oh, my God, you're the worst person in the world. Yeah. He was saying that everybody knows that's the truth. If you don't, you're dumb. Yeah. Okay? And there's it's a perfectly moral statement. And then what happened was, 3 days of criticism after George Brandis, and then Tony Abbott says, oh, no, we're not going to get rid of 18C.
Yeah. So, and here we are now.
And here we are now. Now, it's all gender identity, intersex. You can't offend anybody now.
Yeah. I'll make this the last question. I think there is a parallel. You mentioned COVID a minute ago. I think there's a parallel between what happened during COVID and what's happening now. Brett Weinstein posted this comment the other day. Ukraine is the new mass formation psychosis. The same people who were telling us to stay at home and get jabbed are now telling us we need to spend billions of dollars. We spent billions of dollars during COVID, all wasted. We need to now spend billions of dollars defending Ukraine, and in fact, we can justify sending thousands of men to their deaths, which is, in hindsight, what they were doing with COVID. Do you think we're on the verge of a new mass formation?
Mate, that's chilling. I think you're onto something. So Brett Weinstein said that, okay, well, I'll tell you a personal experience I had this week. I was sitting in this really boring committee in Parliament House, and I'm just flicking through Twitter. I put out this tweet about the Ukraine war, and I just pointed out that in the eastern third of Ukraine, that the people there basically go to Russian church, speak Russian at home, follow Russian media. I put that out there. I woke up the next day, and it's up to about 800,000 views, and 100% of them are people saying that they want to kill me, basically, or I'm the worst person in the world. All these people that have fallen for this mass psychosis. What's the term again?
Mass formation psychosis.
Mass formation. I've copped a lot of hate on social media over the year, Fred, as you have, okay. But this one this week has been next level. And I've just said, look, I'm not going to respond to anybody. These people are maniacs. And I'm thinking, you're saying that I'm the baddie, and I'm the one saying that I want to stop killing young men, that I want these young men on both fucking sides. I want them to become fathers and inventors and artists and farmers and merchants and just have a happy life and leave something behind. And you bastards want him to go out there and get a bullet through his head. Okay, and I'm thinking, and I'm the baddie? Okay, I said, I'll just stay out of this one. But yeah, that's what it is. This one, they've gone, because of course it's Trump. It's all related to Trump, right? Okay, so whatever side Trump's on, these psycho nutcases have to go to the extreme other end.
Yeah. So how do we solve that in Australia?
Oh, well, look, I think, Trump believes God saved him, right? Okay. Now, I have a pretty weak faith. I'm interested in Christianity, okay? So I don't want to mislead anybody, but I'm interested in it in a big way. I have been all my life, but I'm doubtful about everything to do with that subject, okay? But if there is a God, and that bullet that hit just clipped Trump's ear, an extra 2 millimeters this way, his whole head would have been like a watermelon. Would have just gone, boom, you know. And then, and you think, Trump believes God saved him. That's what he believes, okay? Yeah. Whether it's true or not, the important thing is he believes it. So he's just now on this mission. And he said it in that effective State of the Union. So he says, God saved me to do this. And so this is why he's just going so hard. It's not about politics. He thinks he's on a mission from God. So I think Trump is going to be like what Thatcher started in 1979, which was it trickled down. After people saw the success of Thatcherism, the whole world embraced Thatcherism. The whole world, outside North Korea and Cuba. Ethiopia embraced it. That's why there's no more frigging famines there. This is why China's going well, India's going well, the whole of Latin America. There hasn't been a famine in Africa for 30 years. Thank you, Margaret Thatcher. Okay, so, but now Trump, it's going to trickle down. They hate, the world media hated Margaret Thatcher for the first 3 years. Now, Trump's getting to the point now where we're at a tipping point. His polling's going up, isn't it? You know, he's now at this CNN has to admit, 70% of people loved his State of the Union speech, okay? So Trump's turning into this legendary figure, and this is why, Fred, you do strike me as too pessimistic. I'm more relaxed about the perilous state of Australia. The Trump revolution's coming down under, okay? So it's going to affect everything. So this is why I remain absolutely positive about the future.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Thank you.